Hello everyone and welcome back to more Magic the Gathering lore. In today's video, let's continue investigating the latest chapter in the story of Zendikar, Oath of the Gatewatch. Currently, it doesn't look good for the plane or our heroes. The Eldrazi titans Ulamog and Kozilek have just been freed, and the demon Nixilis has regained his Planeswalker Spark. Using his increased power, Nixilis has bested some of our greatest heroes, immobilizing Nissa Ravane, drowning Gideon Jura, and punching Jace Belleron in the face. What hope does Zendikar have now? As a late arrival, Chandra Nalaar searched desperately for two familiar faces, Gideon or Jace. She arrived just before Nixilis ruined everything and called forth Kozilek. She was unable to help in that instant, but she still felt there was work to be done. All hope wasn't lost. If only she could find Jace or Gideon amongst the fleeing Zendikari forces. As she called out to her friends, she attracted a band of Kozilek spawn. Their jittery movements and pointed black edges marked them as those of the Distortion Titan. Their numbers were large, but by this point, Chandra was quite done with their gross appearance. She slapped her goggles down and decided to incinerate the ugly off of them. She took a few steps back and engulfed herself in flame, but she was distracted when she bumped into something metal embedded in the mud. It was a buckler, but this wasn't some ordinary shield. She recognized it. It belonged to Gideon. Without this, how could he survive, let alone fight? Hope dimmed in her eyes, and was replaced by red-hot coals. Before she unleashed her fury, she heard a commanding voice coming from the ravine just below her. It was a woman and what appeared to be a small scouting party. This woman, Tazri, also recognized the shield to be Gideon's. Good, at least Chandra had more allies on Zendikar than she thought. But the news that followed wasn't as warming. Thanks to her flying vampire scouts, Tazri informed Chandra that Gideon, Jace, and Nissa, an elf she had yet to meet, were engaged in a battle with the demon who disrupted Ulamog's prison. The scouts reported that this demon then took his prey to a nearby cavern, for an unknown purpose. Despite the rumors of her men, Tazri was convinced Gideon and his friends were still alive. If anyone could survive that kind of punishment, it would be those three planeswalkers. Chandra left quickly. She was going to their rescue, but Tazri and her company were too injured. They were merely out looking for survivors. Chandra told them to stay back, that she would drive the Kozilek spawn away from their location, using herself as bait. She lifted herself back over the cliff face to encounter the hordes yet again. This time, her fire wouldn't be interrupted. There were too many for her to out-and-out kill, but she could still grab their attention away from Tazri. Turning herself into a living torrent of fire, Chandra flung wild magic at the gross little monsters, killing some and luring the others. Chandra made her way to the cavern opening, but it was sealed off by a layer of mere volcanic glass. As she stared at her reflection, Chandra couldn't help but see the faces of her father and mother. The image of her parents would come to Chandra at the strangest of times. She didn't see them as they died, but just as they had always been in her life. Kind, patient, and loving. But this wall had to go. She clenched her hands together and brought down a fiery hammer, completely obliterating the cave entrance. The cavern was unlike anything she had seen before. It was consumed by Eldrazi, but tainted by dark magic. It was odd yet familiar, as if rage was painted upon pure nothingness. This was the den of a demon. She pushed inwards, her glowing hands as her only source of light. Then she heard a voice, as if it were the deep underlining hatred that comprised us all. As she turned the final corner, she saw Gideon, Jace, and the elf all floating in the air, seemingly unconscious and surrounded by Eldrazi spawn. The demon stepped out of the shadows, asking the little candle, as he described her, why she decided to crash a party she wasn't invited to. Chandra, in rebellious fashion, didn't want to crash the party, but burn it. She lashed out at the demon with spell after fiery spell, each being deflected as the demon guarded with his elbows and wings. Though no true damage was done, Nixilis was impressed by the pyromancer's skills. It actually took him some effort to block her spells. Impressed or not, she had signed her own death warrant. Abi rushed toward Chandra, quickly grabbing her by the throat. His trademark move, apparently. Chandra grasped for breath as the demon continued to taunt her. Nothing had stopped him thus far. How could this little candle? She bit into his hand, forcing him to release his grip. Chandra then tumbled to the floor. Her head wanted to sag, but she wouldn't allow it. Her body wanted to give into the pain, but instead, she used it to fuel the fury of her fire. But even with this newfound hate, the demon was just too much to overcome. Any effort to lift herself up was met by a forceful and debilitating insult. How could this little girl be any help to anyone? Now Nixilis had to punish her. As she was commanded to stay down, Chandra's vision began to wane. Her fire flickered rather than burned. It took all of her strength just to keep her head up. In her blurred mind, she saw the face of her father. Rather than encouraging and kind, he told her that she had failed and that no one could depend on her. Her mother also vaguely appeared, saying that Chandra had failed her friends as she had failed them. It was time to give up and stay down. Her body was giving in to these emotional cues, but as she looked up, her mother's eyes were replaced by those of the demon. It was all a lie. As reality began to take hold, another voice returned. It was true and sweet, just like she remembered her parents. It was mangled and hard to understand, but Chandra was able to decipher it. It kept saying, his Eldrazi. Chandra hit his Eldrazi with fire. Chandra, while weak, would have jumped for joy if she was capable. The voice was Jace, barely conscious, but there. She talked to the telepath through her mind. She understood what he wanted her to do, but she felt she was just too weak to do it. As the demon stayed over top of her, telling her to stay down, Jace gave some inspirational words. Chandra, you damn well can. Get up. Chandra screamed aloud, a sentiment which has been a driving force in her life. She yelled at the demon, "Don't tell me what to do," and exploded in flames. She launched herself at the demon, who easily dodged out of the way. Good, now her spells could hit their intended targets, the Eldrazi. As they burned and shriveled, Gideon, Jace, and Nissa were all released from their distorted grasps. They were weak, Jace being the most conscious of them, which was saying something. Nixilis turned to Chandra as if to congratulate her, but also ensure that she knew they were all dead. He marched over to her with the full intent of ending her life, but stopped dead in his tracks. Jace had made them all invisible for the time being. He couldn't hold the spell for long, but it was long enough for them to design a battle plan. Chandra was ready to take the demon down, but Jace feared he and the rest were just too weak. The invisibility spell broke, and immediately, the demon grasped his hands around Gideon's neck. Again with the whole strangulation thing, Abby. The demon told Chandra that her friends should thank her. Now with this little candle here, they would at least have an audience for their demise. But Chandra knew, she hadn't failed them, they hadn't failed each other, as a blue hue covered Jace's eyes and the elf's hair glowed a wild green. Chandra stomped her foot to the ground, causing a torrent of fire to race from her to the demon. Gideon used the distraction to wrestle free, and all of a sudden, Nixilis was surrounded by planeswalkers. Together they attacked their foe. Chandra flung fire while Gideon assaulted him physically. Jace penetrated the demon's mind while Nissa's wild magic tore into his flesh. Nixilis was now doing more blocking than attacking, being tripped up by conjured vines and Gideon's Surl. He was trapped. It was time to end this. Everyone defended Chandra as she built up a spell so massive it could turn the cavern into a furnace, but it was only meant for the demon. On Gideon's signal, they all jumped out of the way and Chandra hit her target dead on, throwing his burnt body against the cave wall. Nixilis hadn't died, but he was defeated. In classic villain fashion, the battered Nixilis congratulated the group on defeating him, but reminded them that the time spent dealing with him has cost Zendikar so much pain. He vowed to travel the multiverse in search of the most painful ways to end their miserable lives, before finally planeswalking away. Chandra exchanged words with the others, Gideon telling her that he knew she would come, even though she had rejected his initial offer. Their attentions then turned to Zendikar and the Eldrazi. They were weak, but the fight had to go on. The spawn that Chandra had gathered from Tazri were entering the cave. They would face this threat together. And that, guys, is the latest chapter in Oath of the Gatewatch. Chandra pulls out a huge upset, besting Nixilis and his trap, ultimately saving the lives of Gideon, Jace, and Nissa. So it's a happy ending and Abby goes off screaming, "I'll get you next time, you meddling planeswalkers," surely to be involved in another story down the road. But to be honest, I'm a tad bit disappointed. I really expected Gideon to have died, and although I knew he wouldn't, I kinda wish that he had. Again, I don't hate Gideon, I just thought his story was setting him up to die heroically. Perhaps he still will during the fight against Ulamog and Kozilek, but with his death already teased like this, it just won't have the same impact. But anyway, I want to know what you guys think about Chandra's heroics and Abi's vowing for revenge. Let me know in the comments below. And that's gonna do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, consider giving it a like and subbing to the channel. It goes a long way in supporting future content. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.